So many patients tell me that life just feels like a blur because of the pressures that so many of us face. The busyness, the overwhelm, the endless to-do list. I've heard it time and time again. Why haven't things changed? Why can't I bring these healthy habits into my life and make them stick? I've been a medical doctor for over 2 decades, and I have to say one of the most transformative practices I have ever seen is the practice of journaling. Because it breaks the loop. We have these unconscious patterns, these subconscious patterns running our lives. We don't realize how many anxieties and worries and concerns we have whirring around. And journaling is a very simple way to get the stuff out of your brain. You get it down onto paper and you see it. And that does something really, really powerful. There's many different ways to journal. I think one of the most powerful ways is to ask yourself some really, really important questions. In this video, I'm going to share with you 3 morning questions, but also 3 powerful evening questions. And if all you do is choose one of these 3 questions and start asking yourself that question each day and taking maybe 1 minute to write down the answer, I can pretty much guarantee that your life is going to start to change for the better. So the first question is, what is the most important thing you have to do today? This question is deceptively powerful. What comes up for you? Do you have an answer? Do you have the clarity on that question? Or do you freeze a little bit? Do you go, well, there's lots of important things I have to do. Do you think, well, there's an important thing for my work, there's an important thing in my personal life, there's an important thing in my social life? One of the problems these days is that our to-do lists are endless. Right? We feel as though everything is equally important. And therefore we feel frustrated and out of control because our to-do lists are never done. But not everything in life matters equally. And by thinking it does, we fall into a trap. It's a trap the modern world sets for us. And it's that trap that if you fall into it, is going to keep you stuck. You're going to feel unmotivated. You're going to procrastinate. You're not going to move forward in your life because you've got too much to do. This question can immediately start to change that. Now, when I first started asking myself this question, I would say, yeah, well, you know what? There's one answer here for my work life and one answer here for my home life. But over time, as you do this more, you realize that there is only ever one answer. So for example, what did I put down this morning? Well, when I asked myself this question today, I wrote down, when my children come home from school, I'm going to put my laptop down, pay attention, and listen carefully to what they have to tell me. Yesterday, when I answered this question, I said the most important thing I have to do today is stop at lunchtime and go for a 20-minute walk around the block without my phone. That's just 2 examples from today and yesterday. Sometimes it's the same thing, but it doesn't matter. Now, here's something I think many of us don't realize. Because the modern world is so busy and feels so chaotic and out of control, we often feel that we can only do the important things in life once everything else is done. But everything else is never done. There's always something else to do. Let's say you actually do clear your email inbox. Whilst you're in the kitchen making yourself a fresh cup of tea, you'll probably receive another email. There's nothing you can do about that, or you can't control that. And so the important things in life, our health, our lifestyle behaviours, our relationships, they often fall by the wayside because we try and squeeze them in if we find that we have the time. And I've seen this in my own life. I've seen it with my patients. We often feel that we don't have the time. What's so great about this question is that it forces you to write down, and I would suggest you do this in the morning, it forces you to write down what is the most important thing. And what that means is that you've shifted the focus in your brain. Essentially, you can say, if and when you achieve that thing, if and when you do that thing that day is a win. That's a successful day because the most important thing got done. Now, again, I want to get you away from any perfectionist tendencies that you may have. right? I've struggled with perfectionism for much of my life. We know that perfectionism in society is on the rise and it causes us huge problems because perfect doesn't exist. You cannot have a perfect answer to this question, right? If we reflect on the two answers I gave today and yesterday about being attentive with my children when they come home from school or going for a walk yesterday, it's easy to say that they're both important. And yes, of course, looking after my health and nurturing my relationship with my children are both very, very important things. But by writing down what the most important thing is that day, and that answer will depend on what's going on in your life, whether you walked the previous few days, whether you'd seen your kids over the last few days, or whether you'd been too busy working, whatever it might be, it helps direct your focus. It doesn't mean the other things aren't important, but what you'll find is when you ask yourself this question regularly, hopefully every day, you will start to put more intention and focus on what truly is important. Now, if when you start this question, you go, look, I can't choose one. I have to do one for work and one for home life. I would say, okay, start there. But over time, you will find that those two answers merge into one. There is only ever one most important thing to do. And the act of asking yourself this question each day will get you better at making that decision. But the most important thing is that you actually make a decision. You don't have to procrastinate. Well, is spending time with my wife more important than spending time with my children? More important than going to the gym? More important than meditating? That is falling into a very dangerous trap, right? You have to pick one. And by picking one each day, you will get better at it. And you'll find that your increased decision-making will translate to every other aspect of your life. I've seen it with my patients. I've seen it with myself. That one question alone has changed everything. So now that you've heard me explain it, does that change anything? If I ask you that question now, what is the most important thing you have to do today? Could you answer it? You know, it's interesting. I learned recently from the author Greg McKeown that when the word priority came into the English language, I think in the 1500s, it only existed as a singular word. Priority. There was no plural. You couldn't have multiple priorities. Whereas now, what happens? We're overwhelmed by decisions, by choice, all kinds of things we have to do. You know, I've got 10 priorities. No, you can only really have one priority. And this question will help you focus on what that priority is, what it truly is for you. And over time, by answering this question, you will improve your health, your happiness, and your relationships. Now, a few months ago, I spoke to this wonderful lady, Bronnie Ware, on my podcast. She wrote a great book called The 5 Regrets of the Dying. She was a palliative care nurse, and she cared for people at the end of their lives for about 8 years. And she said, you know what? People at the end of their lives tend to say the same things. They say things like, I wish I'd worked less. I'd wish I'd spent more time with my friends and family. I wish I'd allowed myself to be happy. I wish I'd allowed myself to live my life and not the life that other people expected of me. Now, if we think about those regrets, you could argue that they're a form of journaling on your deathbed. But that form of journaling, you could say, has come too late. But what can we learn from that? Well, we can learn that people tend to say the same things at the end of their life. People tend to have the same regrets. And this question, what is the most important thing I have to do today? That's going to help you tackle that. That's going to help reduce the likelihood that you're going to get to your deathbed and have those same regrets. Because you're going to now focus on the important things. Your relationships, living your life. It could be that you've got a busy job and you've got a million things to do at work, right? But it may be that you love playing your guitar and you're going to put down in the morning that the most important thing I have to do today is play my guitar for 10 minutes in the evening. I promise you that will start to transform things, because it means no matter what's going on, and many of us face these busy, chaotic lives, you're going to focus on what is truly important. That's why I love this question. And that's why I'd recommend you consider asking yourself that question every single day. Before I get to the second question, I just want to say a couple of things about stress. So stress is thought to be responsible for up to 90% of what a doctor like me might see on any given day in practice. Anxiety, depression, type 2 diabetes, even obesity, sleep problems, gut problems, low libido, all these things are strongly associated with too much stress. And many of us are feeling that stress overload these days. Journaling can be a very powerful way of helping you reduce stress and reduce things like anxiety. One of the most common forms of stress that I see these days is related to what people do as soon as they wake up. What do you do when you wake up? What's the first thing you do? Do you pick up your phone? Do you look at social media? Do you look at the news? Hey, it's okay. Arguably, most people these days do. But let's just think about why that could be contributing to your stress levels and potentially your mental well-being. A lot of how you feel, a lot of your thoughts, a lot of your emotions are downstream of the content you consume. It's a really, really important point to understand. If the first thing you do each morning is, let's say, watch the news, which, if we're completely honest, is usually full of negativity. Or let's even say social media. If your social media feed is full of negativity, what impact do you think that's going to have on your mood, on your thoughts and your actions? You're basically starting the day with a big dose of negativity, and that then influences how you're going to be for the rest of the day. It influences the way you feel. It may influence the way you interact with your partner, with your children, with your work colleagues. It may impact how likely it is for you to go for that walk, go for that workout, to do that meditation. Because you've got to understand that your brain is wired for negativity. Humans have this negativity bias. That negativity bias is what has kept you alive for so many years. Right? For most of our days on this planet, humans needed to be fine-tuned to the negative. You had to know whether that noise that you heard was just a rustling of leaves in the bush or a predator about to attack. Right? If you got it wrong, if you thought it was a predator but it was actually the winds, okay, no problem. But if you got it the other way, well, that could be the end. Right? So you're primed for the negative. In fact, psychologists find that humans take in 9 bits of negative information for every positive bit. So you are basically hardwired and programmed for that negativity. And that's why this second question revolves around gratitude. What is one thing you deeply appreciate about your life? So when you go on the news or on social media first thing in the morning, if it's full of negativity, you're basically reinforcing that pattern. And I would argue for most of us, we don't want to reinforce that pattern. That pattern is there anyway. We want to do what we can to focus on the positives. We're going to feel better. If you have positivity going into your brain first thing in the morning, all your thoughts, your mood, your actions, your emotions are going to be downstream from that boost of positivity. And that's why I'm such a big fan of a practice of gratitude. Gratitude, intentionally looking for the things in your life that you already have, rather than focusing on what you lack, is one of the most powerful things you can do. It is the antidote to that negativity bias. And the more you practice it, the better you get. If you've never practiced gratitude before, you may think, yeah, well, what do I have to be grateful for in my life? You know, my life's tough. I've got too much to do. I've got too much pressure, too many commitments. Well, most of us, no matter how tough our life is, most of us, if we really think about it, do have some positives. It might be that you have a capable body that's able to look after you. You can afford shoes to wear on your feet when you go out for a walk, whatever it might be. Most of us have got something positive we can focus on. And if you find it hard initially, that's okay. The more you practice it, the better you get. Right? You start to see things in your life that you can be grateful for. So the second question I ask myself each day is, what is one thing you deeply appreciate about your life? So when you hear the word gratitude, what do you think? I mean, the truth is, many religious practices over the years have got gratitude inbuilt within them. All the major religions in the world do. But there's actually a lot of hard science behind gratitude as well. There was a study led by Chad Burton in America, which basically asked people to write about a positive experience for 20 minutes on 3 consecutive days. When they were tested 3 months later, they were found to have enhanced moods, less illness, and made fewer visits to their doctor. This was a full quarter of a year after their 3 days of journaling, which I think is absolutely remarkable. But that was 20 minutes, right? That's a long time. You may feel that you don't have that. There's plenty of studies which show that even a smaller amount of time spent on gratitude can have powerful effects. Researchers from the University of Manchester found that people who had more feelings of gratitude not only slept better, but also had more energy and increased focus. Gratitude has also been shown to lower anxiety, reduce symptoms of depression, improve our self-esteem, improve our relationships, and improve the way we feel about ourselves. And look, what's there not to like about gratitude? It's free. You don't have to buy anything. You don't have to go anywhere. It just takes a few seconds. So if I was to ask you now, what is one thing you deeply appreciate about your life? Could you answer it? Now, if you're struggling, let's start off with really simple things, okay? You can be grateful that you can afford food. You can be grateful that you have the technology that allows you to watch a YouTube video. You're grateful for the fact that the sun is shining and you're able to feel those warm sun rays on your face. Right, you can start there. You could focus on things that you're proud of. You know, I'm proud that I managed to get this job and that I managed to keep it even though it's been hard. You could also write about things that are giving you pleasure. Right, I met a friend today. My colleague made me a cup of tea at work. Whatever it might be, the more you start to look for it, the more you're going to see. So don't worry too much. You don't have to write a long essay. It could just be a few words or just one sentence. What is one thing you deeply appreciate about your life? The power comes from asking yourself the same question regularly. Right? You ask yourself that every day and you get better. You go deeper. You get to understand yourself better. You start to see things that previously you were blind to. And there's 3 things I would recommend you think about doing to enhance your gratitude practice. Number 1, try to be specific. So let's say, for example, you were grateful for the fact that you have a nice cafe in your village and you can afford to buy a nice Americano every single morning. Okay, great. That's a great answer. But how do you make that more specific? Well, what was it about the coffee? What was it about the flavor? Was it the atmosphere? Was it the fact that the barista smiled at you and said something nice to you as they served you that coffee? What was it? If you can get a little bit more specific, you start to train that appreciation muscle, that gratitude muscle even more. The second tip would be to focus on people rather than things. Okay, so you could be grateful for things that you have, the shoes that you have that keep you warm on a cold winter's day. But I would say you enhance your practice when you start to focus more on people. For example, I'm grateful for my friend Fiona, who's really supportive and is always there for me when I need her. I'm grateful for my boss because when my kids aren't well, he or she is totally happy for me to stay at home and work from home. Right? Whatever it is, when you start to focus on people over things, you will start to enhance your practice. And the final tip would be to try to really connect with your emotions. So let's go back to that question. What is one thing you deeply appreciate about your life? Right? So as you're writing it down, really try and connect. If it was that coffee that the barista made for you, just think about how you felt in that moment, how pleased you felt, how cared for you were, how lucky you felt, whatever it might be. As you're writing it, connect with that emotion. And once you start introducing all of these concepts into your answer, you start to enhance it, you get more of the benefits. But again, I want to emphasize, don't worry about enhancing it. Get the practice built into your life first. Your brain is wired to focus on the negative. Don't reinforce that. Start each morning by focusing on the positive and watch how things start to change. I promise you, if there's only one thing you take away from this video, it's to do this. Start each morning by focusing on what you have in life rather than what you lack. And I promise your life will start to change. So why do I ask the question, what is one thing you deeply appreciate about your life? Why couldn't I say 3 things or 5 things? Well, of course I could have. And of course there are benefits to writing 3 things or 5 things down. And many people actually have a journaling practice, which is writing down 3 things that they're grateful for each day, or 5 things, or 10 things, whatever it might be. And that's completely fine. You have to do what works for you. The reason I say one thing is because I want to keep it simple. I want you to watch this video and then take action. I don't want you just to hear it and then go, that was great, and then get on with your life. I want you to go, actually, you know what? Even though I said I don't have time, I actually really do. That won't take me long. So although the question is what is one thing, if you want to write more than one thing, that's fine. But I have found over 2 decades of seeing patients that when you start small, it's much more effective. And if we look at the science of behavior change, right, we know that there are some key rules to follow. Number 1, you want to make something easy. Sure, you can write 5 things down, 10 things that you deeply appreciate about your life. But when your motivation drops, as it always does for everyone, you're much less likely to do it if you have to write a list of 5 or 10, because motivation never lasts. Right? In the research, they call this the motivation wave. Motivation goes up and motivation comes down. If something is difficult to do, you'll do it when your motivation is really high. For example, in the first 2 weeks of January. But when your motivation drops, as it always does, you'll only do it when it's easy. So that's why I just say, write down what's one thing you deeply appreciate about your life. That's one of the reasons the previous question was, what is the most important thing I have to do today? You keep it easy, and therefore you do it. Now, for me, journaling is what I call a keystone habit. So what is a keystone habit? Well, it's a habit that when you do it, it makes it much more likely that you're going to engage in other positive habits. Right? We all have keystone habits, whether we're thinking about them or not. And for me, I know that journaling is one of those. I mean, some of my patients say that exercise or a morning walk outside is a keystone habit. When they manage to do it, it's much more likely they're going to cook themselves a healthy breakfast. It's much more likely they're going to go to bed on time because they know they want to get up feeling fresh so they can go for their walk the next day. You can think of this a little bit like a ripple effect. One positive change leads to more positive changes. And all of us are going to have our own keystone habits. But I've seen time and time again, both with my patients, but also with myself, that journaling can be a very, very powerful keystone habit. On the days that I journal, I'm a better human being. I'm more patient. I'm calmer. I'm more productive. I'm more intentional with how I live that day. And I think the third question actually very much speaks to this. One of the main reasons I think people are struggling so much these days with stress, anxiety, burnout, decision-making, focus, productivity, and their physical health is because they don't have a regular practice of reflection. Now, I've been a medical doctor for over 20 years. I've seen tens of thousands of patients, and I have consistently found that journaling is one of the most powerful practices that anybody can introduce into their life. I've seen time and time again when people ask themselves the right questions, they get the right answers. And I've consistently seen that there are some questions that time and time again people find transformative. So what I've decided to do is put together in my very own journal, the 3-question journal, the 3 most powerful questions you can ask yourself in the morning and the 3 most powerful questions you can ask yourself in the evening. They're simple, they take minutes to do, but they can have a transformative impact on your life. If you want to check out the 3-question journal, all you have to do is click on the link in the description box below. The third question is, what quality do I want to show the world today? What comes up for you when you hear that? Is your mind blank? Or do a few qualities come up? Whatever comes up for you, that's completely okay, even if you don't know what you would answer. The point is, by regularly asking yourself this question, like all the questions, you'll get better at answering them. You'll learn more about yourself, and it will start to change the way you experience each day. For me, this is a very powerful way of intentionally deciding how you want to be in the world. So many of us never really think about how we want to show up that day, how we want to be in the world that day. So we end up repeating past behaviours. We're often reactive. We're often in a rush. And we think that's who we are. But it's not who we are. It's who we might have become over a period of time. And that's okay. But this question is really, really powerful. Like this morning, what did I put down in my journal? Because I do these questions every day. I said, what quality do I want to show the world today? I want to show the world the quality of patience. Now, what's really powerful about that is by taking a moment to think about it and write it down, it means I've brought that into my current awareness. It means that if there's a situation in life where I may have been tempted to react, I'm going to catch myself because I've almost imprinted it into my mind that morning. It's a form of visualization. Let's just think about that for a minute. Think about top athletes. So many of them practice visualization. We've seen from the science there are all kinds of benefits. You'll see top golfers tell you that the night before they play a round in, let's say, a major tournament, they are visualizing every single hole. They're imagining what position they're going to get into. They're imagining where the ball's going to go, where it's going to land, how it's going to roll up to the hole. Tiger Woods used to talk about this. And so the golfers would say, when we're actually on the course, we've already played it. It feels familiar. We've already programmed into our mind what we want to happen. And there's really good evidence on this that actually visualization really, really works. Some scientists will say that there really isn't that much difference between actually doing it and imagining it. Right, so this is why this question is so powerful. If I say, today I want to show the world the quality of patience, it's much more likely it's going to happen. If someone sends me an email that I may have previously interpreted as a bit cold or confronting, I'm going to take a beat, take a pause, and be patient. And the real power is not by asking yourself this question once. It's by asking it to yourself every day. you start to reinforce the qualities that you want. And what are those qualities that you want? What is it in your life currently that you think, you know what, I don't want to repeat that behavior anymore. That's not who I want to be. It could be compassion. It could be kindness. Whatever you want. It could be integrity. It could be curiosity. It could be, today I'm going to be curious. When someone has a different opinion to me, when someone says something I don't agree with, I'm not going to get annoyed. I'm going to try not to feel emotionally triggered. I'm going to lead with curiosity. I'm going to ask myself, I wonder why that person has a completely different opinion to me. In many ways, this question is about choosing who you want to be. You don't have to just wake up and behave the way in which you've always behaved. I think that that's down to chance. That's just who you are. It may not be who you are. It may be who you became. And you can change that. And this question has changed the way I interact with my loved ones. And I've seen it change the way my patients interact. I can literally remember times over the past few weeks, past few months, where I have answered compassion for that question. I want to show the quality of compassion. And if in the day I've ever been tempted to not act with compassion, that question, answering that question that morning, allows me just to pause and go, no, that's not who you want to be. You want to be someone who acts with compassion. And if you do this day in, day out, you will start to see your life start to change. Now, as a doctor, I'm interested in people making better choices with their lifestyle. And a lot of the time we don't realize why we're making poor choices. Let's say we're trying to eat well, and with our rational mind, we think we're going to change things. Well, what often happens is, let's say with our relationships, let's say we've been a bit reactive. We've had a bad day at work. We've had too much to do. We've got home a bit stressed. And then we've been a bit short with our partner or our children. It's a pretty common scenario. I've seen it with so many patients. What a lot of us don't realize is that generates emotional stress in our bodies. And that emotional stress needs to be neutralized. And how do we neutralize emotional stress in our bodies? We generally go towards behaviors that are not that helpful. Sugar, alcohol, doom scrolling online, whatever it might be, because you've generated this stress. A lot of the time that stress comes from the way we interact with others. This is a big problem. And bringing it back to that question, that's why this question is so powerful. In fact, these 3 questions are really, really powerful. They are deceptively simple. But I promise you, if you start asking yourself these questions each morning, these 3 questions, or even just one question, you will start to get to know yourself better. You will start to feel better. You'll have more energy, more clarity, more focus. Your mental well-being will improve. You're going to make better decisions. You're going to interact in a much better way with the other people in your life. You're going to feel better about yourself. And really, these questions they're about living an intentional life. That's why I love journaling. That's why for me, it's a keystone habit. You start journaling each day, let's say in the morning. I really would recommend you think about these 3 questions in the morning. I think they're very, very powerful in the morning. If you just spend a few minutes, let's say 5 minutes maximum it takes for these 3 questions. You start each day with that, let's say with a cup of tea. You just sit there enjoying your coffee or your tea with a pen, with a piece of paper, and you write these down. The way that the rest of your day goes will be completely different than had you started off on your smartphone looking at the news and looking at social media. Now, one question that often comes up with journaling is, what do I need to do it in a journal? Can I not just do it on my phone? Well, here's the thing. It's very hard to say for sure, but most of the research seems to suggest that writing things down on paper is more powerful than typing it in to a computer or typing it in on your phone. And that's probably because humans have been writing for thousands of years. There's something about the pace of writing which in some ways mirrors the pace at which our brains work. I would definitely encourage you to write the answers to these questions on a piece of paper or in a journal rather than on your phone. However, if the option is you either type it into your phone or you don't do them at all, I would say absolutely type them into your phone, because you need to do this. You need to take action. Even if all you do is you pick one question, what's the most important thing I have to do today? And every morning on your phone, you type in that answer. I still do believe you're going to get a lot of benefits. In fact, I can actually remember a 23-year-old patient who was really into his tech, not into writing. I convinced him, because he was struggling with anxiety, he was struggling with procrastination, he'd stay inside a lot. He started answering that question, what's the most important thing I have to do each day? He did it onto his phone and things started to change. And he struggled with social isolation. So sometimes he would say, the most important thing I have to do today is go out into town and sit in a coffee shop so there's other people around me. Sometimes it would be, the most important thing I have to do today is leave the house at some point. The most important thing I have to do today is not order a takeaway for my meal, but go to the supermarket and come back and cook something fresh. Right? And over time, he started to change. Fresh air, movement, healthy food, all these things came on the back of answering that question. Right? So you can do it on your phone if the only option is not. But if you have the choice, I would say write it down with pen and paper. Now, of course, you don't need to buy a journal. You can just take these questions and write them down on a piece of paper each day or in your diary, whatever it might be. But of course, some of us, we take these things more seriously when we have actually bought a journal that we like. We like the texture. We like the color. Something that speaks to us. And when you do that, you start to move these practices away from being routines and they start to become rituals, things that we really look forward to. I look forward to it each morning. I can't wait to sit there with my cup of coffee and my journal. In many ways, it's become one of the most special parts of the day for me because it's a way of having a conversation with myself. That's what journaling is. Now let's think about conversations. Think about the last time that you were with, let's say, your partner or some close friends, and you were able to open up and share what was going on inside. How did you feel afterwards? I think most of the time, we find it really beneficial. We feel hurt. We get to know ourselves through our conversations with other people. Now, that's great if you have access to other people, but not all of us do. And even for those of us who do have close friends, we don't always see them. We can't always get together. So journaling becomes a way of having a conversation with yourself every single day. Now, you don't have to do it every single day. Even once a week or several times a week will help you. But I truly do believe that once you have experienced the benefits of journaling, you will absolutely want to do it every single day, especially because it only takes a few minutes. But my own practice each day, I would say takes me less than 3 minutes to do, but it's really, really powerful. You do these questions for a few days, you'll feel different. You'll start making better choices, but do them for a few weeks, and dare I say a few months. You'll be like a different person. You'll be showing up in the world as someone completely different. You are much more likely to stick to your healthy behaviours. You're much more likely to have more focus, better decision making, less symptoms of things like anxiety and depression, improved mental well-being. These are the types of things that are waiting for you by the simple practice of answering these questions. There's also 3 questions that are really powerful to ask ourselves each evening. But before I get to them, I want to give you a few tips on how to make this a behavior that very quickly turns into a long-term habit. Because that's what I think you want. We can all do something for a few days or a couple of weeks. But real transformative change only really happens when these things become regular practices. Right? You've got to make something easy if you want it to stick in the long term. That's what all the science, that's what all the behavioral change science shows us. So it's dead easy because it's just 3 questions and they don't take long. Even if you are watching this video right now and think, I'm too busy. He doesn't get how busy my life is. Well, you're right, but I have seen tens of thousands of patients. I have seen tens of thousands of people over my career who are probably just as busy as you. And I have always managed to find ways with them to bring a practice like journaling into their lives. And let me just reiterate, answering those 3 questions in the morning will take you less than 5 minutes. Answering just one of them, let's say your favorite one, will take you less than 1 minute. Do you honestly not have time for that? Number 2, you've got to stick this new behavior onto an existing habit. That is the very best way to ensure that this becomes a long-term part of your life. A habit is something you are already doing without any conscious thought. So a simple one, especially in the morning, is a hot drink. Many of us, myself included, love a hot drink. Tea, coffee, whatever it might be. If that's something you do in the morning, could you stick on that journaling habit there? So for me, it is. With my black coffee in the morning, I'm sitting in my kitchen, in my pajamas, right? And I'm writing in my journal. I answer those 3 questions and it changes the way my day goes. But I've made it easy and I've stuck it onto an existing habit. So what's the existing habit in your morning that you can stick this onto? It could be that you do it before you get out of bed in the morning. You have a habit, which is getting out of bed, right? So as you get out of bed, put your feet on the floor, what might it look like if you had a journal on your bedside table and you answered those 3 questions, or just one of them, before you did anything else? Would that make it more likely it's going to happen? Well, I'm pretty sure it will. See, that also includes another helpful tip for making these new behaviors stick in the long term, which is make it visible. By having a journal and a pen on your bedside table, you are visually triggering yourself every time you're in your bedroom. As you get out of bed, you're literally seeing it there. If it's tucked away somewhere in a cupboard or your study or your office, it's much less likely you're going to do it. Or of course, if you are going to do it with a hot drink, can you leave a journal in your kitchen? So when you come into your kitchen in the morning to put the kettle on or to put the coffee machine on, you are visually being triggered by your journal. Is there a pen that you're keeping alongside your journal? These things sound really simple, but they're very effective. If you get to your journal and there's no pen there and you have to move room or go upstairs to get a pen, you're increasing the friction. It means you're less likely to do it. I use these tips for my morning workout. I have a 5-minute kitchen workout that I do each day in my kitchen whilst my coffee is brewing. I'm in my pajamas, and in the 5 minutes it takes my coffee to brew, I do a workout every single morning, and there's a dumbbell and a kettlebell in my kitchen. And you know what? A few years ago, my wife used to say, are they going to live there? Can't you put them out of the way? And I said, well, the thing is, if I put them in the cupboard or in the garage, I'm not going to use them. But if they're there every day, I'm going to be triggered by them. So a dumbbell and a kettlebell lives in my kitchen. And I've rarely missed a day in over 3 years. That's not because I have more motivation than you. It's because I understand the principles of behavior change and I've applied them. So use those principles. Think about how are you going to make it easy? where are you going to put journaling into your day? Are you going to buy a journal? If you are, what colour is it going to be? What's the colour that speaks to you that's going to make it more likely you're going to fall in love with it and do it? Or are you just going to do it on a pad and paper at home? That's okay. There is no right way. You have to find what works for you. So these are just little hacks. They're little tips that are all supported by science. The more of those things you start to bring in, the more likely it is you're going to stick to them in the long term. I like to finish each day by asking myself some questions so I can reflect on what's happened. I can learn from what happened in the day. You see, those morning questions are about setting the tone, setting your intentions for the day. The evening questions help you reflect and learn. Okay, there was a study conducted by the Harvard Business Review which found that participants who journaled at the end of each day had a 25% increase in performance compared to the control group who didn't journal. The researchers concluded our results reveal reflection to be a powerful mechanism behind learning. I think that's key. When we reflect, when we're continually reflecting and assessing how our day went and how we want things to change, with the morning questions, but also these 3 evening questions, we start to learn. We start to deeply learn things about ourselves. Just like an athlete who's got a coach who watches them perform and says, you know what, that was good, that wasn't so good, next time improve this. That's how the athlete gets better. That's what journaling does for us. It helps us improve whatever aspects of our life we want to improve through that process of self-reflection. So the first question to ask yourself each evening is, what went well today? This is a really powerful question. Remember, your brain, my brain, all of our brains have a negativity bias. So it's very, very easy to get to the end of the day thinking you had a bad day, thinking nothing went well. You focus on all the things you didn't get done, the emails you still have to do, the fact that you didn't get to the shops or whatever it might be. That's really common. We all know what that feels like. This question starts to change that. There is almost always something that went well in that day. It could be that your colleague made you a cup of tea. It could be that someone let you out as you were trying to turn into the main road with your car. They paused to let you go. It could be the bus driver smiling at you on your way to work. It could be something big, like you got a promotion or you finished a project that you've been working on for a while. It could be all these things. Or it could be something really, really simple, but really significant, like I was really busy today. I was really tired when I got home, but despite that, I took 20 minutes out to cook my family a healthy home-cooked meal. By answering this question each day, you remind yourself of at least one thing that went well that day, and that starts to change how you feel about yourself. It also helps remind you on a daily basis that things are going well each day, because without that question, it's very easy to think that everything's bad. And I've seen with my patients, that question is transformative, especially when you combine it with the second question, what can I do differently tomorrow? Put these 2 questions together, they're really, really powerful. You learn about something you did well, and then you go, here's an area I can improve. So it could be, for example, that the second question, what can I do differently tomorrow? You may say, I was really, really tired today. I stayed up late last night. I was super stressed after work. I didn't want to go to bed. I was up watching my box set really, really late. I'd say when I woke up this morning, I was exhausted. I couldn't focus. I was a bit reactive with the people around me. I had too much coffee, too much sugar, all because I was sleep deprived last night. Tonight, I'm going to make sure I actually go to bed on time. I'm not going to stay up late because I've seen the consequence of when I do that. Or it could be something else. It could be, you know what? In the morning, when I said, what's the most important thing I've got to do today? I said, go for my 20-minute lunchtime walk. And maybe you didn't do it. Maybe you didn't manage to do it, even if you wrote it down first thing in the morning. That's okay. Life's not perfect. We're all human. We don't get it right all the time. That's okay. The problem is, though, we can start to beat ourselves up. We can start to get negative. We can start to think that we can't make changes. But these two questions together are very, very powerful because they help you change in a very, very compassionate way. You are being kind to yourself. What went well today? What can I do differently tomorrow? So it could be that you say, you know what, today I didn't get out for that walk. I know how good I feel when I put my phone down and go for that 20-minute walk at lunchtime. I know that I'm more productive in the afternoon. I'm better focused. I feel good because I know I'm doing something for my health and I sleep better that night, whatever it might be. So you put down, tomorrow, I'm going to make sure I go for my lunchtime walk. And actually, I've designed these evening questions to work very, very well alongside those morning questions because each one keeps reinforcing the other one. And it allows you to compassionately keep assessing yourself, but also making change. It helps you become self-aware. And that's the most important skill you can ever develop. The self-awareness is important for whatever you want to achieve in life. Now, what's really interesting about self-awareness is that most people will tell you they are incredibly self-aware. But the research suggests that that's not quite the case. There's some powerful research showing us that only 10 to 15% of us really have a high degree of self-awareness. I mean, that means the majority of us, up to 90% of us, are not that self-aware. If you start regularly journaling, you'll be able to catch the patterns. You'll be able to go, when I have a stressful day at work and I'm not feeling good in myself, my go-to at that point is sugar. That's self-awareness. Right? That's the self-awareness that journaling is going to give you. And that's why I think journaling is so powerful. So have a think about them. Have a think about those questions. What would stop you from asking yourself those two questions in the evening? It just takes a few minutes. I've been a doctor for over 20 years. I've seen tens of thousands of patients, and I have to say that journaling is one of the most powerful habits I've seen with all of my patients. When people journal regularly, I see improvements in things like focus and productivity. I see improvements in their mental health, their decision-making, but also in their ability to make healthy change in their life. And the reason is because journaling helps you get to know yourself better. If you ask yourself the right questions, you'll get the right answers. And I've created my very own journal called the 3-Question Journal. In that journal are 3 of the most powerful questions I believe that you can ask yourself each morning and each evening. Now, these are questions that are tried and tested with my patients over the past 2 decades. These are busy people with busy lives. And the reason I've created this journal is to help people with a very simple practice that doesn't take any more than 5 minutes that can immediately start to have a huge impact. Now, there's many ways to journal. You have to find the right method that works for you. But if you're interested in trying something new this year, I think the 3-Question Journal that I've created is very, very powerful. It's simple, it takes minutes to do, and I genuinely believe it will transform your life. The third question I'd encourage you to ask yourself in the evening is, what did I do for someone else today? And again, it's a very, very powerful question. Many people who are struggling with their mental well-being become very inward focused. Everything is about us and our life and why we're struggling. But one of the quickest ways to take you out of that is to do things for other people. Take yourself outwards. And it may be that you try and answer that question and go, you know what, I didn't do anything today. I was just caught up in my own world, with my own work, with my problems. Okay, no problem. These journaling questions, these prompts are there to help you in a compassionate way. But if you genuinely think you've done nothing for anyone else, that's okay. You put it down and you're prompted to do something the following day. Because if you don't, you're going to have to answer that same question again, say, I didn't do anything for anyone. But the truth is, very few people haven't done something for someone else. Again, the more you do it, the better you get. You think broadly. Oh, I was driving today to drop my kids off at school and I let that car out at the main junction. I didn't have to do it. I did that. The postman came round and I said, thank you for the delivery they brought round. I went to the supermarket and there was an elderly man who was struggling with his shopping and I helped him to his car with it. Once you start looking for these opportunities in your life, you will find that they are there. And as I say, if you genuinely think you don't do things for other people, simply asking yourself this question will prompt you to do that. And there is just so much research behind kindness, behind doing things for other people. Individuals who are other-focused experience greater happiness. One study suggested that practicing kindness may have more of a positive effect on our health and happiness than diet and exercise. Now that's really powerful. Why might that be? Well, when we do things for other people, we feel good. We feel good about ourselves. We are social animals. We're designed to be with and around other people. When we're doing something that brings us closer to them, we send ourselves a signal that the world is good. It's a safe place. I've got a tribe around me. And therefore, you're much more likely to make better choices because you feel good about who you are. It's really, really powerful. There was a Japanese study that found that simply counting your own acts of kindness each week makes you happier. Well, that's what this question's doing for you. If every night you're saying to yourself, what did I do for someone else today? You're reminding yourself constantly that you do things for other people each day. And if you do get a journal, you can actually flip back through your journal and go, wow, man, I've done something every day this week for someone else. And that sends yourself a signal that you're a good person. You're a caring person. And that's really, really important. So please do not underestimate the power of these questions. After over 2 decades of clinical practice, having seen tens of thousands of patients, I genuinely believe that the reason people struggle in their life is because they're reacting. They're not living an intentional life. They're not choosing how they want to be in the world. So they allow the world and the people around them to dictate the way they're going to be. That's why journaling will change your life. That's why journaling will transform the way you experience things, because you're taking charge. You become the driver of your life rather than a passive passenger. Now, I want to reiterate something. I have come up with what I consider to be the 3 best questions that you can ask yourself each morning and the 3 best questions you can ask yourself each evening. And how have I come up with those questions? Yes, I've looked at what the scientific research says, what it supports. But I've also combined that with what I've seen with patients. What are the questions over the years that have really moved the needle, that have actually made a difference? Because science is great, but we have to be able to convert that science into people's busy lives. If we can't, it doesn't really matter what the research says. So these questions have been tried and tested in the lives of thousands of my patients. They've been tried and tested in my life. I know they work. And I know if you give them a shot, they're going to work for you. So how are you going to make these questions a part of your day? How are you going to make them a part of your life? How are you going to make those 3 morning questions a ritual? Right, where does that fit in? Do you want it in your life? Hopefully I've persuaded you, I've convinced you, hopefully I've even inspired you to start each day by asking yourself those 3 questions. Hopefully I've also done the same for the 3 evening questions. So have a think. How are you going to bring journaling into your life? Are you going to buy a journal? What colour is it going to be? Are you going to just do that on a pad and paper? Where are you going to put that journal or that pad? Where are you going to visually trigger yourself each day to do it? Is it going to be your bedside table? Is it going to be your living room? Is it going to be in your kitchen? My challenge to you, if you're on the fence, is to pick one question. Go, I'm going to do that. I'll do that one question for 7 days. Don't do it for less than 7. Don't assess whether it's working until you get to 7 days. At least give it that time. You could pick, that morning question. What's the most important thing I have to do today? Do that for 7 days. It can literally be done in less than a minute. But let's say it takes you a bit longer, 2 minutes. I pretty much guarantee you're going to feel better about yourself. You're going to feel better about your life at the end of those 7 days. And then once you've experienced the benefits, I think you'll want to continue. Of course, if you don't, I completely understand. But give it a go. Get these questions into your life. Find a way to bring them into a routine. Over time, turn that routine into a ritual. And before you know it, it's going to be something that you actively look forward to. Honestly, when I go to bed sometimes in the evening, I can't wait for the following morning because I'm looking forward to opening up my journal. It's a way of having a conversation with myself each day. It transforms the way I think. It transforms the way that I show up. And ultimately, it transforms the way I experience life. So make it easy. Think about where you're going to put it in your day. Start small and watch your life start to change. So many people these days are struggling. We're living in that time, aren't we, where there's so much wealth. We have so many things. We have so much technology, yet society is getting sicker. More and more people are struggling with their health. More and more people are struggling with their happiness. And they don't realize that those two things are actually very, very strongly linked. I've been a medical doctor, Tom, for almost 21 years now. Right? I've seen tens of thousands of patients. And it's really only in the last few years I've studied and seen that there is a very, very strong link between happiness and health. And that question, why are so many people unhappy? I think the simplest way to answer that is because people don't understand that happiness is a skill, right? It's a skill that we can practice, we can develop, we can get better at that skill once we know what to work on. And I've got to tell you, I never learned that skill. I certainly didn't learn it at school. I didn't learn it from my parents. Society certainly did not teach me those skills. And having spent the last few years writing this latest book on happiness, I feel that I've managed to simplify it right down into very practical, tangible things. I think we all do want to be happy. I think that's become a little bit unfashionable these days. People say it's not about happiness, it's about meaning, it's about purpose. And hey, I'm all for meaning and purpose, but I don't think they're necessarily the same things as happiness. I think every human being at their core wants to be happy, and I want to help teach people how they can do that.
Now, I'm one of those guys that's all about meaning and purpose. I'm literally the guy that you're referencing. I talk a lot about the way that I define happiness is something that's pretty transient. So I'm always trying to get people to focus on fulfillment.
Yeah.
And so one of the things is I was reading your book, I was like, okay, for him and I to have a fruitful conversation, we're actually going to have to define happiness, like what you mean by it. And so in the book, you make a really careful distinction between what you call core happiness and junk happiness. And I think it would be useful to give the definition and the 3 legs of the core happiness stool.
Yeah, it's a great point, Tom. Like if you say the word happiness to 10 different people, I think you could well end up with 10 different interpretations of what that means, right? We all have a different idea of what that is. And so in the introduction of the book, I was very, very clear with trying to specify, what do I mean when I say happiness? What do I mean when I say every human being wants to be happy? And I have, as you say, this definition called core happiness. Right? Core happiness, I want people to think of as a 3-legged stool. And the reason I've created it like this is because I want people to understand that it is a skill, right? So everyone understands that if you go to the gym each day and lift weights, you're going to get stronger, right? That's not
That's not hard for anyone to grasp. That's ingrained in our brains these days. And I want people to think of happiness in the same way, right? If you work on these 3 legs of the stool each day, or as often as you can, you are also going to become happier. So what are those 3 legs? Alignment, contentment, and control, right? So what do I mean by that? Alignment, okay. Alignment is when the person who you are inside and the person who you are actually being out there in the world are one and the same, or getting closer and closer. Basically, when your inner values and your external actions start to match up, right? That's alignment.
Why do you think that matters so much?
It matters because a lot of us don't know who we are anymore, right? A lot of us don't know what life we're wanting to live. Right, a lot of us are living unintentional lives where we're essentially asleep. Right, I'll give you an example, Tom, of what I mean by that. I feel until the last 3 or 4 years, despite relatively high levels of success, I think I was pretty unhappy and discontented in who I was. I don't think I really knew who I was. And I think one of the biggest problems in society is that we confuse success and happiness. Now, success is success, happiness is happiness. They can both overlap for sure if you're intentional about it. But for many of us, they simply don't. And I think for much of my life, I craved external validation. I only felt good about myself from the validation of others when I was achieving things. And I outline in the book where I'm sure this came from. When I was a young boy, my parents were immigrants from India to the UK in search of a better life. They came here, right? And they faced a lot of discrimination, a lot of struggle, like many people who emigrate and go to different countries. And I remember, Tom, I would come home from school, and if I had got 19 out of 20, they'd look at me and say, well, why didn't you get 20? If I got 99% in an exam, no word of a lie, it was like a stern look, why not 100? Right? Now, it's really interesting. As I was writing this book, Tom, I went round to my mum's and I said, hey, Mum, can I ask you something? Why did you and Dad say this to me when I was a kid? And they said, look, we face a lot of struggle. We face a lot of discrimination. We didn't want you to have to go through what we went through. So in our heads, right, the way for you to avoid that is to get straight A's. Go and get a great job like medicine, a secure job. Go up that sort of regular set out path of promotion, right? And achieve success. And here's the thing, I did all those things. But the problem is, Tom, every situation has multiple perspectives, right? So Mum and Dad are trying to drive me to be the best that I can, right? Great. But there's another perspective to that. Walk around to the other side of that table, and little Rangan takes on the idea when he was very young that I'm only loved, I'm only worth something, I'm only enough when I've got straight A's, when I'm top dog, when I'm top of the class. And whilst on the outside, it can look as though I, have achieved all these societal boxes of success, on the inside, there was a real discontentment. And actually, over the past years, as I've learned to go inwards, pretty much since my dad died, as I've stopped looking for the answers out there and turned inwards and started looking for the answers inside, why do I get triggered in certain ways? Why do I behave like this or feel like this when certain things happen? As I've gone and healed all of that, I'm now living more in alignment. I understand what alignment is. I understand what an intentional life is for me. And that's why, honestly, I'm 44, Tom, as we have this conversation. I've never felt this good. I've never felt this happy. I've never felt this content. And a big part of that is because I now live in alignment.
All right, so let's talk about the intention. How important was it for you to stop and actually write that down? Because you said you yourself didn't really know who you were. You suspect most people don't know who they are. So one, what does it mean to know who you are? And then two, how do you identify your values so that you can write them down?
Yeah. This wasn't a one hit, I wake up one day and go, I get it now, right? Now I write these down, now I'm aligned. No, this has been a step-by-step process of constant refinement. Why is it so important, right? I was reading some work by Hans Selye the other day. He is the godfather of stress. That you may be familiar with his work. He pretty much coined the word stress. at least in the way that many of us use it today. And he said that in the 21st century, the biggest stressors are emotional, and the greatest one of all is not being ourselves. Right? I think that's so powerful, coming from someone like him. He was articulating that us not acting in alignment with who we really are is a huge stress on the body, right? And given all the research he's done, I think coming from him, that's quite a profound statement. For me, how did I go about that process? I, first of all, would realize that every metric I hit, every bit of success I had, you have another bestseller, right? That's the truth. Like this maybe people can't resonate with this, but I can only speak my truth, Tom. This is my 5th book in 5 years, right? They've all been Sunday Times bestsellers. Now, here's the thing. You get the first one and it hits the list and you're excited. You think this is great. Yeah, I want to help people. I want to help 100 million people around the world live happier and healthier lives. But I can't deny that also there was a part of me that was attracted to the validation that comes with having a successful book. I would be lying if I said that wasn't the case. So it made me feel really, really good. But you realize that these successes are very short-lived. Before you know it, they've gone again. And, this happens year after year. I keep hitting these metrics of success. And I think, I know, but it doesn't really change how I feel. Like, it really doesn't. It's an artificial high. I guess you can almost call it a junk happiness type habit, which I can explain shortly. But I realize more and more why, with all this success, with all this external validation, why do I still move towards these junk happiness habits? Why do I still not feel enough in who I am? It didn't fill the hole that was there inside my heart. And Tom, you've had people on your show before saying the same thing. I don't know if you've heard of a chap called Johnny Wilkinson or not. Johnny Wilkinson is one of England's most famous rugby players, right? He was probably one of the most famous rugby players in the world in the early 2000s, right? In 2003, he achieved all of his dreams, right? So when he was a kid, Tom, he wrote down, when I'm older, I want to play for England and I want to win the World Cup. Now, here's the problem for him. At the age of 24, he achieved his dreams, right? 24, he's playing for England. Not only do they win the World Cup, he kicks the winning goal in the final minute of the World Cup final. He came on my show recently and he shared that actually even before that ball had gone through the goal, he's starting to go downwards inside. The next morning, he can't get out of bed, depressed, anxiety.
That's so crazy.
For years.
The chills.
He achieved his dreams. That's why in chapter 1, I make quite a provocative statement. Your dreams won't make you happy, right? And I want to add a caveat there. Your dreams won't make you happy unless you're intentional about them. So what I think many people have learned, Tom, over the past couple of years, particularly with all the restrictions and, the fact that people can't move around and do the things that they've wanted to do and always used to do, I think a lot of people have reflected on their lives, like what's truly important for them. What is it that truly makes them happy and feel content? So there's a really simple exercise in the book that I think is deceptively simple. It's very, very powerful. And I don't know, Tom, if you're interested, I could try it on you right now if you're up for it.
Sure. I've seen you do this. Let's go.
Yeah. Have you got prepared answers?
I don't, actually.
Okay, good. Okay, so top of your head, don't overthink it, right?
Yep.
If I was to ask you, what are 3 things you could do this week that if you did them would truly make you happy and content? Can you name 3 things?
So for sure, spend time with my wife, write creatively, and what would be a third? Meditate.
Okay. And then the second part of this exercise is what I call write your own happy ending. So now, fast forward, Tom Bilyeu on his deathbed, right? Looking back on your life, what are 3 things you will want to have done?
Yeah, so I may think differently about the deathbed than most people. So this will be interesting. When I'm on my deathbed, what I will be thinking about was, did I love my wife and elevate her and make her feel awesome and really get that relationship to thrive? And then I will ask, did I turn my potential into usable skill set And then did I use that skill set in a way that actually fulfilled me and helped other people? But I really think on my deathbed that it's going to be a bit of it's just a frame of reference game. And you talk a lot about Edith Eger?
Edith
Am I
Eger,
getting that
yeah.
name right? Who survived Auschwitz, just the story is insane. And her whole thing is basically how are you looking at the situation? So for instance, I think that on my deathbed, I will probably regret that I didn't have kids, but I don't regret it now. And so I've primed myself on how to think about it, because on my deathbed, I will want something to live beyond me, right? I can already feel that. So like, I get how at that point, especially if, I mean, look, as much as I want to believe that these YouTube videos will live forever, I know better. And so I can feel that tug now. It's one of the ways that nature ensures that you have children. So I do think on my deathbed, I might perform a slightly different act than other people. Sort of however I end up, I'm going to frame it in a way that is optimistic because I'm about to peace out. So, and I think that speaks to a lot of your book, but tell me if you think I'm crazy.
No, I love that. You're someone who, it doesn't surprise me, lives a very intentional life. You know, I had the pleasure of speaking to Lisa yesterday on my show, right? We had a long conversation, and, you know, she was sharing the game that you guys often play, the no BS game, what's it going to take, right? So this is a very intentional game where you guys literally, you know, instead of having wild dreams, you break it right down and you specify what is the goal, what literally will it take to get there. So it doesn't surprise me that you and Lisa are people who are very intentional about how you're choosing to live your life. And, you know, in Lisa's book, and you've mentioned before, you guys have intentionally chosen not to have kids. So it's really interesting for me to hear you saying that actually, despite that intentional decision that we made, you feel that you may regret that on your deathbeds. Now, I think for many people, what this exercise is about, it's about intentionality. It's not about beating yourself up. For example, Tom, most people will say, like you, on my deathbed, I hope I've nourished my friends and family, my meaningful relationships. Yet if they look at their week-to-week life and they realize, wait a minute, I'm working so hard. I know you work super hard. I know many people who watch these videos, Tom, work really hard. I'm working so hard that actually I don't have any time to see my wife, see my friends, see my partner, see my kids. And what this exercise does, it just allows you to reorientate your life and go, okay, wait a minute. I'm slightly off track here. You know, Tom, I don't know if I've shared this with you on a previous conversation, but I always remember this patient I saw a few years ago, 37-year-old chap, right, who from the outside, it looked as though this guy was crushing life. He ran his own business, right? He drove a sports car. He made really good money. He worked on his terms. He didn't have a boss. No one's going to tell him when to work. He worked most weekends, right? He comes in to see me, and he's worried that he's got depression. He says, Doc, I feel low. I'm struggling with motivation. I feel indifferent about things a lot of the time. Is this depression? And we did I ran a variety of tests with him. I spent time getting to know him, and I asked him a question. I said, how often do you see your friends? He said, Doc, I don't have time, right? You know, I really don't have time. You know, I'm kind of up to date with what they're doing on Instagram or Facebook, but I'm busy with my business. And the prescription I gave him that day, Tom, honestly, no word if a lie, was, look, what I want you to do for the next few weeks is once a week, in person, I want you to see one of your friends. And when you're with them, try and put your phone away. That was it. And he said, you know, is that all you want me to do? I said, I just want you to do that. Focus on that. I'll see you in a few weeks. Now, this guy was desperate. I appreciate it wasn't the prescription he was, expecting to get from me, but nonetheless, this is what I was picking up. 6 weeks later, Tom, he comes back. He's almost bouncing into my room. He's got a smile on his face. I say, you know, how are you doing? He said, Doc, I feel like a different person. I've got my mojo back. I've got my energy back. I've got my vitality back. I said, what happened? He said, well, I started off every Sunday going to the local cafe. I'd meet up with one of my friends. We'd just catch up for an hour over a coffee. We'd keep doing that each week. And after a few weeks, we decided on a Wednesday night after work, we're going to get together and play five-a-side football, right? honestly, Tom, right? 6 weeks, I did nothing. His mood state changed. That then continued for months afterwards. That one change led to all kinds of other positive lifestyle changes, like better diet, because he realized actually he couldn't run around playing football anymore like he used to, right? So the point I'm trying to make is he thought he had depression. He certainly did not have an antidepressant deficiency in his life. What he had was a friendship, a meaningful connection deficiency in his life. And the funny thing is, Tom, his friends thought he was crushing it. His friends thought, hey, I know he's busy, but he's busy with work. He's doing great. So actually, it was only by revealing himself to his close friends that he got his vitality back. He got meaningful connection. He got his health back. That's why this stuff is so interesting to me. So when we bring it back to this deathbed exercise, right? Many people like you've said, one of the things you want to do each week is spend quality time with your wife. What's the first thing you said on your deathbed, right? I want to have made sure I have maximized on everything possible to lift up my wife. And, it's so incredible to hear that. That's alignment, right? I know you're very intentional about the time you spend with Lisa, but a lot of people are not like my patient. And so this exercise really helps bring them into alignment. And Tom, yes, you may have a slightly different view because of the way you think, but I don't know. When we talk to palliative care nurses, right, they tell us over and over again what people say on their deathbed, and it's not as different as we might think. They all say the same kind of thing. I wish I'd worked less. I wish I spent more time with my friends and family. I wish I'd allowed myself to be happy. And then speaking to alignment, Tom, what is another thing that they say? I wish I'd lived my life and not the life that other people expected of me. Right? So people say that on their deathbed. Hans Selye, the stress researcher, is saying that living an inauthentic life is a key part of stress. I'm saying that despite all my success, I've probably been quite unhappy, and I didn't even know I was unhappy and discontented because I wasn't living in alignment. So hopefully this is making the case that alignment leg of the stool, and it's only one leg, there's two other legs, they're all important, but I think that...
Before we get to the other two, you said something, and I really want to push on it, and that is palliative care nurses say the same thing over and over and over, and one of the things is, I wish I had allowed myself to be happy. What do they mean? It feels like a secret to the universe is hiding in allowed myself.
Yeah,
I wish I had allowed myself to be happy. What does that mean?
Yeah, this is in Bronnie Kerr's book, The 5 Regrets of the Dying. I wish I'd allowed myself to be happy. Now, what does that say? Because I agree with you, Tom. That's powerful. Allowed myself. That implies, doesn't it, that I could have done, but there were other forces around me. There were other reasons why I didn't step up and I didn't step into that role of being happy. I think, as I said at the start of this conversation, it's a skill. It's a skill that you can practice and work on. Happiness is that skill. It's not something we just stumble across and end up upon when everything happens to go our way, when our spouse treats us nicely and our email inbox is under control and the weather's nice or whatever. I don't think that's happiness. Happiness is something we can work on. So I think what that phrase means, and I obviously can't speak as to exactly what all these people were saying. I hope I'm many years away from being on my deathbeds. I certainly feel I've got lots more to do and contribute to the world. But I think that's exactly what it means. I think they realize, oh man, I knew what it was. I knew what was important, but I didn't do it. And that's what this whole book and this whole conversation is really about, Tom. It's about helping people realize, wait a minute, you can be happier than you currently are. Honestly, you may be chasing success. I think you can have success and happiness. I don't think you have to choose between the two, right? I really don't. I don't think it's as hard as people think. And, you mentioned, how important it was to write down my values. Very important. So important, Tom, because even that exercise, right? Let's take the step one. That exercise, I would challenge every single person who is listening to this or watching this conversation to pause it at some point or at the end. Just write that down. Do that exercise. Because there's something very powerful about taking this stuff out of your mind and putting it down onto paper. It makes it real. And then what's really powerful about it is because you've made it real, you can edit it. You can tweak it. But if you have nothing there to start, you've got nothing to work with. And, I've just finished a book tour in the UK, been going around different cities talking about this book. And I spoke about values. And then I would ask people, I said, you guys have heard, me on my show talk about values, on all kinds of podcasts around the world. You've heard people talk about values all the time. How many of you have actually ever taken the time to write them down? I know a few hands went up, right? And Tom, as content creators, this is something that's really important to me. And this is why in all of my books, I spend a lot of time editing, simplifying, making them readable, making them practical. Even though my ego wants to make these books longer and more in depth, right? If I want to help people and impact 100 million people, which I do, I know I need people to read these books and make a change in their life. So it was really interesting to me that people are hearing this stuff, they're not doing the exercise. So me writing it down, like I'm at the stage now where at this moment in time, my 3 core values are integrity, compassion, and curiosity. But I didn't get them straight away. I did not get them straight away. So writing them down is a critical first step. And Tom, any author will tell you, like when they're trying to write a book, the first draft is always rubbish. It's always rubbish, right? But you can't edit nothing. You have to put something down that you can edit and then make better. So I want people to, do that exercise at some point today if they can. And then, I think it's a very good practice to try and write down what are these values that encompass who you are.
I love that. So getting into the other 2 legs of the stool, I think my interpretation anyway of the palliative care nurses saying that people say that they should have allowed themselves to be happy is contentedness and focusing on, look, I have what I have. And so the tension in life is I want to be grateful. I want to be contented because it feels a lot better. And I also don't want to be stagnant. And so I think largely because people don't do the self-exploration, they never quite figure out that you really can do both. So they're just blindly propelled forward by the sense of I want more, whatever, what you call in the book, the want brain. And so they want more, but they never take the time to develop the contentedness. So walk us through that. How do we accept our wanting brain and yet cultivate this other leg of the stool?
Yeah, so the second leg of the core happiness stool is contentment. What are those things that we can do that make us feel calm, make us feel at peace? When are we at peace with our life and our decisions? And I think built into the question that you asked me there was this idea that a lot of people never take the time to think about these things. They never take the time to think about what they already have. It's constantly, what can I do more? What can I push for? What do I want? As I write about in the book, I call this thing the wants brain, that part of the brain that makes you think you want more money, another slab of chocolate, a new car, whatever it might be. And sure, I'm not against those things. The problem is if we think those things are actually truly making us happy and content, which the research shows us that people who constantly crave these things and get these things are more depressed, they're less motivated, they're less confident, right? So we know that. So there's all kinds of practical things that people can do. The first question I'd ask people is, what are those things in life that you already do, that you already know make you feel calm and content, right? Because a lot of us know, even simply taking a pause to ask ourselves that question is so powerful. It could simply be, when I spend time with my wife, when I go for a walk without my phone in nature for an hour, I feel better, right? Put it in your diary, schedule it in. It's so basic, Tom, honestly, right? I feel like in 2022, in this highly technological society, it's kind of like, have you not got something better than that for us, Doc? And it's like, well, actually, no, I haven't, because that is the sort of stuff that genuinely makes people feel contented and happy and at peace. But I would say a big thing, which actually hits the contentment leg, but also the third leg, which is control, which we'll get to shortly, I'm sure, is a practice of solitude each day. It's what I call in the book, take a holiday every day, right? I don't know if you read.
I love that you call of course. I love that you call solitude a vacation, though. That's as only a parent could.
As only a parent could. But when I came up with the idea of calling it this is a buddy of mine was telling me about a factory in which he used to work, right? And his boss would have on his counter like a countdown, like 66, 65, 64, and he'd rock into work and his boss would say, yeah, only 64 days till I'm on a beach in Florida. Only 63 days till I'm on that beach in Florida. Only 59 days to go. And I thought, isn't this incredible, right? This individual is living his life simply counting down the days, counting down the tedium until he has that 1 week of bliss. And I thought, well, what is it about a holiday? What is it that he's craving? And I thought about this. And of course, there's many things, Tom, that people get from holiday, right? Sunshine, time with their loved ones, lying on the beach, whatever it might be. But I think a big thing is perspective. They get a perspective on their life, a 30,000 foot view, quite literally. You know the feeling when you're on that plane taking off, you literally start to see your life differently. You have that big picture outlook on your life, right? And so for me, I thought, well, why do we have to wait for that 1 week a year when we can go on vacation, go on a plane, go on a beach? We can actually take a holiday from our lives every single day. And I would say it's absolutely crucial, Tom, that we do so. Now, that could be anything, right? But it could be a walk. It could be meditation. It could be mindfulness. It could be reading an uplifting book. But what it is, and I think it's so important these days, Tom, is that we're so busy being in our lives, right? We're so busy consuming content. From the minute we wake up, we're consuming emails, podcasts, videos, whatever it might be, even good quality shows and podcasts, right? I think the problem is that we're constantly consuming. We never have any time for our innermost thoughts and emotions to start coming up. And intentional solitude is probably the most important practice in my life. For me, I do it in the morning, first thing in the morning. And I know that when I do that, every aspect of my life is better. I'm a better human being. I'm a better doctor. I'm a better husband. I'm a better father. But really, it's what I call a daily holiday. It's just a practice each day where you step outside of your life to get to know yourself, because there's no way you're going to be able to live an intentional life, a happy life, a contented life, unless you take time to understand what you're really feeling. And I honestly say to people that even if you're consuming killer, uplifting, inspirational content all the time, even that's problematic. You have to be able to sit with your own thoughts. But I know you meditate every day, Tom. I mean, what does meditation give you, Tom, would you say?
It lowers what I call background radiation. So stress, anxiety, it just starts building up at a biological level. And it's interesting, in your book, I've never heard anybody else say this, but I think it's really true. You point out that people can get addicted to things like soap operas. And I was like, that's really interesting, because it's an input that changes your neurochemistry. And so for me, meditation is the way that I change my neurochemistry, where I lower that background radiation. So rather than seeking another YouTube video or learning something new, which would be the thing that I would go to, I just take that time to physiologically, like literally breathing from my diaphragm and just sitting there and focusing on my breath. I can just feel, even describing it to you now, I can feel my brain relaxing. I can feel my body relaxing. And so to your point about without that solitude, without that space, that holiday from yourself, you can't figure out what the emotions are that you're feeling. You never get into what I'll call a calm and creative state. Because when you get in that calm and creative state and something's been on your mind, suddenly connections that otherwise wouldn't happen in your brain start to happen. And you might have that insight about, whoa, that's why I'm feeling that. Like you putting it together about your childhood and only feeling worthy when you're at the top of the class. But if you never create that stillness, that silence, you never get to that realization.
And I think it is taking a daily holiday, because that is literally, as you were describing that is what a lot of people say, or similar themes to that when they go on holiday. That's the feeling they get, and you can access that on a daily basis. Tom, I remember when I was second year at a medical school, I was a junior doctor in Edinburgh in Scotland. And I remember I was working in acute medicine, and I was being taught by my senior about something called early warning systems, right? And I remember it so well, because it was really a profound moment as a doctor for me. And he said, listen, guys, if you check regular parameters like heart rate, blood pressure, oxygen saturations, and you track them, then we know now that we can, with a high degree of certainty, predict who is going to need a high dependency bed in 4 hours, who's going to need an intensive care unit bed in about 8 hours. I thought, this is amazing. This is amazing. We can track this stuff, and by doing so, and someone's following a certain trajectory and path, we can take, preventive action. We can get involved, do something different to stop that happening. And as I was writing the book and writing this chapter on taking a daily holiday, that popped into my head. I thought, wait a minute, that's exactly what a daily holiday is. It's our own early warning system on our life, right? Many people suffer with stress these days. They suffer with anxiety, Tom, these days. We're so disconnected from our bodies and our innermost thoughts. We're so up here in our head, moving forward, learning new things, consuming more and more and more, that actually we're not listening to the signals that our body is sending us. Tom, for years, right, and I think I was experiencing, when my stress load would go high and really I was dealing with a lot, I would feel a tightness in my right upper back. Now, I never knew that because I've only noticed it recently. In the last few years, since I'm diligent and meticulous about my daily holiday, this happened a few weeks ago after the book came out. I was like, oh, there it is. And it was a real message to me. It's like, okay, Rangan, you have to do something different. You either have to cancel some things you've got on today. You have to maybe prioritize an earlier bedtime tonight. You have to say no to certain things. It was my early warning system that allowed me to change my course of action so I don't have a row with my wife, have problems, make bad decisions at work, right? So it's very powerful. The other thing you said, right, which I think is another thing to really think about here. I consume your content, Tom. I like watching your show, and I know a lot of people consuming your show would like to make better decisions in their life, right? They want to make better decisions, and I think it's a slight oversimplification of how the brain works, but I think it serves a useful purpose. We can think of our brains in two parts: the front part of our brain, the prefrontal cortex, where we make quality, rational, logical decisions, and the deeper, more primitive, emotional part of our brain, like where the amygdala sits, okay, which is where we're led by emotions and fear. And those two parts of our brain are always vying for top spots, right? They all want to be top dog. And what we really want is our prefrontal cortex online, so that actually we can dampen down those stress and alarm signals from our emotional brain. When it's online, we're making good quality decisions. We're taking in all the information, we're absorbing it all, processing it all, and making a good decision. When our stress load is building up, right, when we have narrowed our perspective, our prefrontal cortex pretty much goes offline, and our emotional center, the emotional part of the brain, is ruling the roost. It's running everything. And so this is why we often make poor decisions, let's say at 3 p.m., 4 p.m., like we've done nothing to dissipate the stress. Our prefrontal cortex is offline. We send an email. The next day we're like, why did I send that email? Like that wasn't what I thought. What was going on? We forget that actually we see the world through the state of our nervous system. So if your nervous system is constantly tuned and elevated, what happens when your nervous system is on? Think about it. If you're in fight or flight, what actually happens? And if you think you're running away from that tiger, everything in your body starts to change, but your focus goes in. You literally narrow your focus, right? To make a good decision, you don't want narrow focus, you want perspective. When you actually can take this daily holiday, have some time to self-reflect, think about your values, think about alignment, think about the type of life that you're leading, right? Everything starts to soften, like when you do your meditation, and your perspective widens. So it's kind of metaphorically, but also physically and physiologically, it's changing how we operate, it's changing how we see the world. So I think if the only thing people take from this conversation, Tom, right? If there's one thing I want them to take, it's like, please make sure that at least for 10 or 15 minutes a day, you have some intentional solitude where you have no inputs coming in, and you allow your body to start speaking to you, and you allow your innermost feelings to come out.
Yeah, and that speaks to the third leg of the stool, which is control. Getting control over your physiology, I think, is incredibly important. It's something that I don't think people spend a lot of time thinking about. They certainly don't spend time mastering. Oftentimes they'll try it, and whether it's working out, whether it's eating right, whether it's meditation, there is a discomfort to it in the beginning. It's a facing either, it could be the food addiction, which has a whole host of very complex physiological parts to it. Working out, which is just painful and it sucks. I hate it to this day. And then in meditation, by getting quiet, first everything in your mind coughs up. And so it can be very hard to, like you said, broaden it and not get more stressed. And so as you think about control, how do people gain more control? So we've talked a little bit about the physiological side, but how do people get control? And how did that become one of the 3 foundational pillars of core happiness?
Yeah, so to take the last point first, what I was looking for when creating this model was to create a practical model, because number one, big picture, I saw there was a strong link between happiness and health, right? Happier people are healthier, and there's numerous studies which show that in a variety of different ways. There's many reasons for that, which we can maybe get to if there's time, but there's a strong link there between happiness and health. But I felt that third leg, control, was really, really important, particularly at the moment. And when I say control, Tom, let me clarify what I mean, right? I'm talking about a sense of control. It's not about controlling the world around us. It's not about controlling other people. I think when people try and control these external events that they literally have no control over, that is a recipe for unhappiness and discontented living. I think the events of the last 2 years have taught all of us that the world is going to do what the world is going to do, right? Whatever you want to happen, things are going to happen anyway. But a sense of control is different. It's like, what are those things that you can do regularly that give you a sense of control over your life, right? The research shows us super clearly, Tom, that people who have a sense of control, they have high levels of motivation, higher levels of success, they earn more money, they're healthier, and they're happier. Right, so having that sense of control, or that agency, is really, really important. So how can people do that? Well, I mentioned this daily holiday. What that does for me, Tom, right, what that does for me is that I know when I've given myself 30, 40 minutes each morning, I do a variety of different things within those 30, 40 minutes. And it used to be 10 minutes. I've built up over the years because I've seen how important it is for me to thrive. I know that no matter what is going on with the world outside, with my work, with my family, with my kids, no matter what's on the news, right? It doesn't matter. I have carved out a bit of time myself that grounds me. It's almost like a ritual. That it gives me a sense of control that makes me feel focused and calm no matter what's going on outside us. So that's why I think these little routines and rituals, people don't have to copy that. They can find their own one that works for them. But I think that's one way that we can look at a sense of control. But another way, which I want people to think about this, is there are other things we can broaden out what we mean by control. So there's a part of your brain, Tom, called the sociometer. And basically this part of the brain is always scanning the external world around us to look for threats. Is my external world safe or not? Now, chapter 6 in the book is called Talk to Strangers. And this is because the research is overwhelming that when we have these not deep and meaningful interactions like you may have with your wife, Lisa, or we may have with our close friends and our family, no, these kind of low-grade interactions with strangers where we smile, we say hi, and they sort of nod back and they give us a smile back. These sort of things we know are very powerful because what they do is they send your sociometer a signal that your external world is safe. That makes you feel in control, because when you feel your external world is unsafe, you feel out of control. So control can mean multiple things. And that's just 2 examples of how people can actually think about control in their lives. What are the things that they do that give them a sense of control? That's going to help strengthen that leg, which means it's going to help them strengthen their happiness. What are those things that they do that actually make them feel out of control, Because if you're feeling out of control, you can think about the model and go, oh, wow, my control leg is getting weaker. My control leg is going to break. So my feelings of happiness are also going to start collapsing as well. Was that clear, Tom?
Definitely. I think it was such a like hard left in the book when you got to the third one. And I was like, wow, that's really interesting. And then I've heard you talk before about the different ways that people define happiness and how some of them begin to crumble. And I thought it was actually a really keen insight. I think it's very true. I think when people don't feel that they control any aspect of their lives, they're really in trouble. Now, I'm probably intentionally edging up towards delusion on how much we can control. And so I try to do things knowingly. I don't know where the edge is, right? So I look at somebody like Elon Musk, who's, attempting to terraform Mars. And on the one hand, it's sort of patently ridiculous, right? To think that you can influence something on a planetary level. But on the other hand, because he allows himself to believe that, or can convince himself to believe it, he's built the first reusable rocket, right? So it's like you need that little bit of delusion that gets you going. It was, I think, very insightful.
But that depends, right? On that depends what the goal is, right? What's the goal? If the goal is to do something that no one has done before, if the goal is to grow a media company to impact 1 billion people, right? That's fine. But if the goal is happiness, then suddenly we look at these things very differently. And I think that the whole point here is about living an intentional life, right? It's about understanding, what are you chasing? Why are you chasing it? And everyone's going to be different. Some people don't want to be Elon Musk. Some people don't want to be you. They don't want your life, right? They don't want my life. Some people are very content, or their goals are very different from my goals or your goals or Elon Musk's goals. And that's okay. We're all allowed to have our own goals, but what we need to do is live our own life and spend time defining what they are. Tom, you said something really interesting right at the start of this conversation, which has been playing at the back of my mind since you said it. Particularly so because I had a long chat with Lisa, your wife, yesterday. And we spoke about your intentional decision not to have kids and how that process went. Yet you mentioned when we played that exercise, that your happy ending, your deathbed exercise, you think you're going to regret not having kids. Now, if you don't mind, I'd love to just understand a bit more there, because I think what's powerful about this exercise is that it helps bring intention to our life and go, yeah, you know what, I think this is going to happen. This is what I'm going to be thinking about. Now, I'm not saying you guys want to or don't want to, but I would say that the power of that exercise is that if someone is starting to feel now that they've made a decision and now they're thinking, yeah, you know what, I think I'm going to regret this, it potentially allows them to revisit that and go, okay, you know what? I know 5 years ago we said this, or I said this. It felt right then. Maybe it doesn't feel right now. And I'm not saying that's the case with you, Tom, at all. I don't want to overstep the mark for sure. But do you know what I'm getting at? I know this exercise helps people,
I do.
But I'm interested.
So here is something I think very, very strongly. People misunderstand that you will go through phases in life. And so I can project to my deathbed and say the things I will care about when I have no more time will be very different than the things that I cared about when I had maybe even the illusion of time. Because who knows? I could die this afternoon.
Yeah.
But I have the illusion that I have a lot of time left. And so I live my life in accordance with that. Now, given how much I love my wife, how much I love my life, how much I love storytelling, how much I love ambition, how much I enjoy the thought of doing grand things, it's like, I really want kids. Rangan, I really want kids. The only thing I want more than to have kids is to not have kids. And so I make use of the time and energy that would otherwise go into having kids. But I'm not a fool. I could write you a poem right now that would leave you convinced that I knew what it was like to have kids and to have that kind of deep emotion and love and connection and sense of progeny. Like, I get it. So I'm not foolish enough to think that as I age, that my frame of reference won't change. So the big question of my life is, what phase do you live for? Because I could live for the end phase of my life and be like, I'm on my deathbed and I have no regrets and this is amazing. Or I can recognize what I think is the right answer, which Edith, your Edith, who survived Auschwitz, taught us, which is, it doesn't matter what happens. It matters how you think of it. And so my thing is, the best advice I ever got around kids was, Tom, have kids, don't have kids. It doesn't really matter. But whatever you do, do it all the way. And so when we decided not to have kids, I said to Lisa, just know when we're on our deathbed or when we're really old, we're going to regret this. And as long as we're loving it now, then when we're there, just keep that frame of reference. We fucking loved our lives. Like, this was incredible. What a ride. But don't go into it now thinking, oh, you'll never think that you'll never hit a phase where you wish you had kids.
Yeah.
Because
Tom,
you probably will.
That is so beautiful on so many levels. It really is. That the big thing that speaks to me as I hear that is you guys have been intentional about that decision, right? So here's the thing. Even if you get to your deathbed and you are regretting it, at least you consciously chose, right? At least you went through the process of weighing up the pros and cons, figuring out where does this thing come from that I think I want kids, I don't want kids, right? And you've made it. You made a list, you made the pros and cons, and you made a decision. Fine. Many people, Tom, many of my patients, many people that I talk to are making unconscious decisions. They're having regrets on their deathbed, but they've never actually thought about it, right? These people who are saying, I wish I'd allowed myself to be happy. I wish I'd see my friends and family more. I wish I'd work less. You know, all these kind of things that people regret and they say they wish they'd done. You, I feel, you're very different because you've approached it with intentionality. So I find that very, very powerful. And I think even if that's something that people take away, that can be very powerful. Because you're right, how do you actually know anyway? How do you really know how you're going to feel when you're, I don't know, 80, 90, what is it, 120, 130, right? How
Let's
do you,
hope, bare minimum.
How do you know how you're going to feel? And you don't. But at least if you're thinking about it, I think that helps. The other thing for me, Tom, closing the loop on this maybe, is that I've reevaluated, particularly over the past 2 years, what I want out of life. I've realized that I truly, truly love nothing more than spending time with my wife and kids. Like, truly, there is nothing I enjoy more than being away, being present with no technology, no phones, just being with my wife, Vid, and my children. And I've realized actually, as my kids get older, you know, they're now 12 and 9, I was thinking, well, my son may not be at home for that many more years. And I've realized I would rather have less success and spend more time with them. And I'm consciously now, writing this book has been hugely beneficial for me. You know, they say, don't they, authors write the books that they need for themselves. Right? I needed to write this book. It's helped me put words to a lot of these thoughts. It's helped me make better decisions. I resigned from, I host my own BBC Radio 2 show, which is the biggest radio station in Europe, you know, the only national wellness show in the UK. I handed in my resignation a few weeks ago because I realized it's a great show. It's a great opportunity. It's helping lots of people. But the cost to my life, yes, with my family, also my mother, who I don't think is going to live for that much longer. She's very immobile now. She lives nearby. I help look after her. All these things have played in. I realize now I value relationships more than I value that level of success. And so this is a constant moving target. It doesn't mean, you know, as you say, you know, what phase are you in? What, you know, when I was 20 years old, I wouldn't have seen life like this. But at 44, I'm seeing it very differently. And that's okay. All the exercises in the book are not one hits. They're things that we can keep revisiting. We can keep going back to go, you know what? That decision felt right at 30. It doesn't feel right anymore at 40. And I think that's okay.
I totally get it, man. So I want to hear a little bit more about junk happiness. I think this is really interesting. I think it's probably a bit of an epidemic at this point. And give me some examples. What are junk happiness things that people get caught up in today?
Yeah, so junk happiness is the opposite of core happiness. Everyone's got several junk happiness habits of choice, right? What can these things be? It can be sugar, alcohol, pornography, sex, gambling, booze, 3 hours scrolling Instagram, online shopping, compulsive consuming and buying, whatever it might be. They all seem, well, on the surface, they all seem quite different, but at their core, they're often very, very similar. They are a way that we want to distract ourselves, to not feel, to numb what's going on. And the problem with junk happiness, they're not necessarily bad, these junk happiness habits. The problem is if we engage in them too often, or we make the mistake of thinking that these things are bringing us true deep contentment, that they're making us truly happy. And what's really interesting, Tom, is that I think junk happiness is an epidemic. You've spoken, as I have, to Anna Lembke, I think, on the show about dopamine. Incredible lady, incredible research. And what does she say? She says something like the smartphone is the modern day hypodermic needle. I think she says that in her book. It's, we've literally got every source of addiction that we want on there. And I call these junk happiness habits. And I think it's a very useful way for people to think about these things, because a lot of people think that's what happiness is. I feel good when I'm looking at Instagram. Sure, you might feel good, but if you're doing that for 2 or 3 hours a night, actually, that's not really helping you. It's keeping you stuck. It's making you depressed, less confident, less motivated. So I think just bringing a name to this really brings it home for people. But people, I know the feedback is that people really like that term. It really helps them see those things in their life. Oh, that's another one of my junk happiness habits. But what's really interesting, Tom, for me, is that often we try and change these habits by saying they're bad, I need to stop doing them. And we think we need to use motivation and willpower to do it. But I actually think that's short-lived. I'm not sure that's the whole story, because, as I say, I've been a medical doctor for 21 years now. I've been trying to help people change their behavior for many years. And what I've learned is that every single behavior in our life serves a role. It's there for a reason. And often we try and change the behavior without understanding what role it plays in our life. You classically see this in January, right? A lot of people, they get to New Year's Day and they basically say, I'm going to give up alcohol. I'm drinking too much alcohol. And they sign up for some plan, dry January or whatever, and they quit completely. And for the first week in January, they're not drinking. Second week, they're still not drinking. The third week, they've still got a stressful job. They've still got an unhappy relationship at home or with their boss. And, it just starts to creep in again. And they keep beating themselves up. Why am I still drinking? Well, they thought willpower was enough, but they've not spent the time understanding, no, you're using alcohol to help you de-stress from your job, from your workload, whatever it might be. And this is why I think, Tom, that a lot of public health guidelines just don't work very well when we say you should only drink this amount of alcohol per week or do this amount of this. And I understand why there's a need for that, but it's missing a big piece, which is what role does that play in your life? And so I think, like in my own, if I talk about me for a moment, I mentioned some of my childhood earlier on and how I developed my sense of self-worth. And so a couple of things to say on that, Tom, which I think people might resonate with. I always thought I was competitive, right? In fact, if you would ask any of my friends, some of my closest friends, and you say, tell me about Rangan, and you'll say, oh, he is super competitive. He will not lose. Because I literally would not lose. I would do whatever I had to do to win. And what's really interesting, Tom, is now, today, I'm not competitive. I'm not competitive. It wasn't who I was, it was who I became, right? Really, really big difference. If you think about how I got my self-worth as a kid, I thought that if I do well, if I get success, people are going to like me, my parents are going to like me, right? Well, it's a pretty smart move to develop the trait, the behavioral adaptation of being competitive. It's a masterstroke, because if you're competitive, you're going to keep getting that validation. But the problem is that competitiveness led to a lot of junk happiness habits. I share in chapter 3 of the book. When I was at university in Edinburgh, I still remember on a Sunday afternoon, we'd often go to the local pool hall, after a couple of nights out of partying, we'll just unwind, playing some pool. And I'm a pretty good player, right? If I was ever losing, Tom, right? If I was ever losing and I thought I might lose the match, I would go into the toilets. I would look at myself. I'd give myself a talking to. I'd give myself a little slap on the face, right? I'd go in, I'd come back, and more often than not, I would win. Not always, but more often than not. What I've realized in the last few years is that I didn't love winning. I just couldn't stand to lose. Losing was too painful for me. I thought losing said something about who I was. Now, here's the thing, Tom. As I've gone in, as I practiced a lot of the tools in this book, right, I've healed those holes inside myself. I now like the person I see in the mirror. Like, honestly, if I can be so bold as to say it, I love the person I see in the mirror. I really like the person.
That's great.
Yeah, and I didn't used to. And as I now can do that, and it's not been a quick process, but it's been a very rewarding one, I'm no longer competitive. Genuinely, I am no longer competitive in the way that I used to be. And a lot of those junk happiness habits that I had in the past, like sugar or gambling, I used to gamble a lot in my 20s. Never to the point where you would say, Rangan needs to go and see someone. But I can look back and go, hey, it wasn't that healthy a relationship with gambling. I love the buzz of gambling on anything, right? The bookmakers, the horses, a game of pool, the golf that was on television, whatever, just for that quick buzz. Here's the thing, Tom, as I've healed that hole inside me, I no longer gamble. I haven't gambled in over 10 years. I've not tried to. I rarely now will get that craving for sugar in the way that I used to. I'm not saying I never have sugar, but rarely. All kinds of little things that I had, these junk happiness habits, they've now fallen by the wayside, not because I've tried to get rid of them, but because they no longer serve a need in my life. And I think, Tom, this speaks to this bigger picture as to why am I, as a medical doctor, writing a book on happiness, right? Because I don't think it's usual. It's not normal. It's certainly not typical. It's normally happiness researchers or psychologists. And for me, it's because there's a very, very strong link, more powerful than we think. And actually, for many years, Tom, and I've been on your show before saying this, that 80 to 90% of what we see as medical doctors is in some way related to our collective modern lifestyles. I still stand by that. But for the past years, there's been a niggling idea inside my head. Is this really the root cause? Is this the upstream driver, or is there something more? Because I would see people, Tom, who would make changes to their lifestyle, they'd feel great, and then they'd go back to where they were before. I thought, well, this is not a knowledge problem, right? These guys know the information, they felt the difference. Why have they gone back? Other people, made great changes to their lifestyle, but they were still struggling. I thought, what am I missing? What's going on here? And that's why I dived into the research. That's why I reviewed my 20-year practice and go, which patients truly transform their life? And the research very clearly shows that actually happiness is a key driver for health. So for me, I actually think happiness, mental well-being, the way you think about the world, the way you approach the world, actually is more important than your lifestyle, because actually many of our lifestyle behaviors or lifestyle choices are downstream consequences from the way that we see the world, right? You mentioned Edith Eger, Tom. That conversation I had with Edith on my podcast literally changed my life. I was not the same person after that conversation as I was before it, because I thought, if she can reframe the most harrowing of human experiences and she can write a different story in her mind, well, I can do that in my life. There's nothing in my life that compares to what she went through. If she can reframe it there, I can. And when we learn to reframe things, and there's a very powerful chapter in the book called Seek Out Friction, which is my favorite chapter because it's the one that's had the biggest impact on me. When you understand that every single situation in life has multiple perspectives, and you can train yourself to choose what I call the happiness perspective, you don't create emotional stress in your body. This is another thing that I think a lot of people don't realize. Emotional stress is real. A lot of people think, yeah, I've got a great diet, I move my body, I'm focusing on my sleep. But actually, the email from their boss that they don't like, really triggers them. They're like, man, I can't believe my boss did that. Does he not know I've worked in this company for 4 years? I know how to do my job. How dare he speak to me like that? Whatever disempowering narrative it might be, that creates emotional stress. That emotional stress needs to be neutralized in some way, usually with a junk happiness habit. It's the same thing if people drive to work and they get cut up on the roads and they then go into this whole mindset of, man, stupid driver, shouldn't have a driving license, can't believe he did that, right? That creates emotional stress. If people are honest with themselves, they'll realize that they might have a few extra coffees later, a bit extra sugar, another chocolate bar, and might need a few extra beers later to dissipate that stress. And so I passionately believe that focusing on these simple steps to improve our happiness will have a very, very powerful downstream effect on your physical health and your lifestyle behaviors. And that really was my motivation to write this book, Tom.
Facts. The book is Happy Mind, Happy Life. I highly encourage you guys to get it. It is phenomenal.
If you found that content useful, I think you're really going to enjoy this video where I outline a simple framework for a morning routine that can immediately improve your health and your happiness.
You've actually made yourself more resilient. You've actually lengthened the distance between where you currently are and your stress threshold and where you're going to be after that morning routine.